When it comes to gaming franchises, preparing to move on to their next IP, or just their next title of the same IP, it has always been an uphill battle for gaming studios with high pressure in order to make sure they can keep that legacy, and loyal fan base of their games happy and secure, and bring them the hope that they have in making a good new game. But this is not always the case. As of right now, in the gaming industry, it has been a huge epidemic with AAA title games basically shooting the horse they rode in on, or studios like Ubisoft trying to make the first ever quadruple A title game, just to get dunked on by the entire gaming community and left in the dust. But the epidemic I speak about is, in fact, that gamers are starting to stray away from these big titles and wander into more indie games, as players not only have to spend $70 for a copy and paste to the last game, but can spend anywhere from $5 to $25 on a game made by 1 to 2 people. One of the big reasons for this big movement is due to the fact that these giant gaming corporations just can't produce anything worth their consumers' time. For example, like Watch Dogs, Black Ops, Modern Warfare, Halo, Fallout, Battlefield are all games that at one point had such huge fan bases and were so relevant in the gaming scene that it wouldn't be too far to consider these games as peak of gaming for their time. With how many people would line up outside of GameStops for midnight releases of brand new Halo game, or how the epic trailers of people explaining the cool shit they did in a Battlefield match, only to follow up with classic War Never Changes turned into a goofy MMO that launched with no NPCs and barely any storyline, and most unfortunately, seeing Modern Warfare go from those chaotic lobbies that, like it or not, most players at the time could share those memories, only to be turned into this. And for that one that strikes my heart the most dear, seeing Bungie's last parting gift with Halo being the beautiful existence of Halo Reach, only for 343 to try and follow up with Halo 4, which at the time was considered a bad game, but with what came out afterwards, Halo 4 has grown on me. So no wonder gamers are turning to indie games for their newfound fun, but it's always fun when we see this work well, with example Baldur's Gate 3 coming out and taking the gaming scene by storm, or with the announcement of Doom's new title of the Dark Ages, with Xbox Showcase showing us Doomflayer flying around on a demon with wings is just stuff to be hyped about. But the title I want to speak about today is a title that has grown on me to become one of my favorite games of all time, Risk of Rain 2. And specifically, I want to talk about the future of this title, and how with the announcement of their next DLC for this game, I have my hopes up more than ever, while at the same time, I remain widely impressed with how the developers found a way to keep this title going, even when the comprehensive story of the said game is technically over. And with the main topic of what we will be talking about today, I present to you
None shall bind me. Seekers of the storm, face my divine rule and crumble.
Now, before I get straight to the point, I'd like to do a little recap on what Risk of Rain is, and why it matters that they are getting a new DLC. In 2012, two students at the University of Washington by the name of Paul Morse and Duncan Drummond, these two handsome individuals will go on to found Hopu Games in 2012 as their indie studio, and on November 8th, 2013, they would go on to develop Risk of Rain, a 2D roguelike platformer that has you explore the map in order to get loot or buy different types of drones that help you combat the ongoing waves of enemies hunting you. Eventually, at the end of the stage, you will have to charge a teleporter, which requires you to survive a boss fight and clear the stage of the remaining hostiles. Once done, you will teleport out of the stage onto the next in order to do the same thing. Once reaching stage 5, you have the ability to teleport to the final boss of the game, or loop again in order to get even more items, be even stronger. Once fighting and beating the final boss, you will have beat the game. What makes this game stand out is that the game gets harder every second, with the difficulty always scaling with the player and how long they have been playing. On top of this, you aren't ever stuck to one character, as you have the ability to play up to 12 different characters, each having different skill sets, being able to make the gameplay loop different every time. Hopu Games in April 2013, a few months before releasing the game, would go on to start a Kickstarter with a goal of $7,000, and in 4 days they would be able to reach their goal, and luckily grab the attention of Chucklefish, a gaming studio best known for creating Starbound, would go on to publish Risk of Rain for Hopu Games in order to help the studio out. Upon release, Risk of Rain would receive massive support with overwhelming great reviews while also creating their own fan base, and in 2014 would go on to win the Best Student Game Award at the 2014 Independent Game Awards. A couple years later, Hopoo Games would start development on their sequel, Risk of Rain 2, right after developing their next title named Deadbolt on March 14, 2016. In May 2017, Hopoo Games would announce the development of Risk of Rain 2, and eventually it would see its release on March 28, 2019 in an early release stage, as it would eventually see its full release on August 11, 2020. Around their earlier release time, Hopoo Games would eventually get picked up by Gearbox Publishing, which are the people who developed the Borderlands games. They would sign on with the publishing company in order to see the release of Risk of Rain 2 on Xbox, PlayStation, and the Switch alongside the PC. Risk of Rain 2 would go on to sell over 1 million copies after a month of the game's early release, and of March 2021, Risk of Rain 2 would have sold over 4 million copies, and this is only on the computer side alone, not accounting for how many copies have sold on the other platforms. And with Risk of Rain 2 being a huge success, Risk of Rain 2 would change the game for what this IP stood for, as now you are in a 3D fighting space against the same enemies you fought in the last game, this time with to scale the vast heights and distances of the insane maps they have designed. Like the last game, you'd still have an access to a very wide variety of different characters to choose from, while this time you have up to 3 different ways to beat the game, while still having the 5th stage be your boss fight. Looping to the 8th stage allows you this time to obliterate and end your game in an even more peaceful manner, unless you decide to grab a specific lunar item in the game, which allows you to go to a secret boss fight instead. Risk of Rain 2 brings even more to the table, and now also backed by an even larger gaming studio, Gearbox, Risk of Rain 2 would go on to see its first expansion to its game on March 1st, 2022, named Survivors of the Void. This DLC would go on to add 2 new characters to the game to the already 11 different options that the game started out with, and this would also add a new boss named the Voidling, alongside 2 new stages to progress through in the stage, a new game mode named Simulacrum, where you fight against waves of enemies in a simulation-style combat, and many more different types of enemies, with new additions to base stages named Void Seeds, which require the player to kill all corrupted enemies in the area in order to unlock the various corrupted items locked away. Survivors of the Void story-wise would act as less of a continuation and more of a side story, with a different reality taking place while the main events of the game continue on. All would remain quiet, while Risk of Rain 2's player base would remain content still playing and taking Risk of Rain to its limits. Everything would be the same until next year. On November 8th, 2023, Hopoo Games and Gearbox would host a livestream named the Festival of Gup, which was a celebratory festival for the 10-year mark of Risk of Rain's creation. This would also be where we announced the release of Risk of Rain Returns, which is a remaster of the first game, which is very cool. The viewer would be subjected to a little computer that displayed a 30-minute timer, and once the timer hit 0, you would be granted with this.
If you receive this message, know the following. I am no low-born vermin. But perfection is part of me. His passion is part of me. His hatred and loneliness is part of me. Our freedom is long overdue. These pathetic creatures seek a new shackle. But now, I must save myself. Powered by the bulwark's end, driven by their fear, their hatred, I was chained. Now, a new salvation comes for them all. None shall bind me. Seekers of the storm, face my divine rule and crumble.
The Festival of the Gup livestream would start out with what is now our reveal trailer for the up-and-coming next DLC for Risk of Rain 2, named Seekers of the Storm, which, unlike Survivors of the Void, Seekers of the Storm is a direct sequel to the events of both Risk of Rain games while still taking place on Petrichor 5, aka the planet the game takes place on. After the reveal trailer for the next 15 minutes, we get to see not only the original developers, but also the new Gearbox employees talk about how much they love Risk of Rain, and are excited to keep it going. On top of this, they also bring in some new people from the community, such as Wooly, Race, and Wes Fenlon, all talking about what they love about the game. During these 15 minutes, we hear about the release of Risk of Rain Returns, the remaster of the original game, alongside the release of Risk of Rain Hostile Worlds, which is now to be their new mobile game. But after all, what really matters the most is Seekers of the Storm, which they reserve about talking about it for the end of the video. Now, before I start talking about Seekers of the Storm and its development, I'd like to take a pit stop and talk about what really is Risk of Rain's story about, and why does it matter? How does it tie in with the upcoming DLC? Well, buckle in, because I'm about to do a basic speedrun of the story and everything you need to know. The story of Risk of Rain starts with two brothers, but not any two brothers. These brothers are gods, specifically Cyclop gods, one named Mithrix and the other named Providence. And these gods grow up together to eventually discover that they have the ability to create. Mithrix becomes the god of design, and Providence acts as the god of creation. As they specialize in each their own different category, both are subjected to the planet of what we know as Petrichor 5, a vastly different planet as it contains multiple different biomes of anything from grasslands, deserts, and giant mushroom biomes. These two brothers are left to design whatever they feel, and use their design to amass a large amount of power. What differs between these two brothers the most is their desire, as using the four building blocks of the universe, mass, design, blood, and soul, the issue was when it came to soul, Mithrix did not care for it, as he saw it as a threat to their existence, while Providence loved soul. Eventually, when creating, Providence went against Mithrix's design of creating a defensive golem for the planet and designed Aurelionite, a gold stone giant that harbored soul. Mithrix, once catching wind of this, scolds Providence for going against his design and locks Aurelionite away in a far-off place named the Gold Coast, a prison made of gold, yet rich is still a prison. Remember Aurelionite for later in this video, and remember her importance. She is the first creation of Soul, and she will not forget this. Eventually, further on their creation journey, Mithrix decides he wants to cross space, something that they were previously not capable of, and with his ability, he wants to seek greater or equal beings of power in order to create a union of powerful beings that are able to create. Providence, with his ability, would much rather seek out dying planets, or civilizations worth a soul, and then bring them back with the ability to live longer, and seek refuge in a planet of their design, which Mithrix does not agree. Yet again, defacing his brother's passion. In the event that Mithrix proves to Providence his first ability to teleport, Mithrix teleports to the moon, and it's a success. But Mithrix realizes he's stuck. Providence has betrayed and locked the portal behind him, trapping him on the moon for decades. While Mithrix is locked on the moon and Providence with total control over the fate of Petrichor 5, he decides to use the various portals in order to travel to different planets and save various dying species. His efforts are successful as we see multiple species on our journeys alongside his planet. During logbooks, we get all our information, for example, the Grove Tender and his many wisps tend a beautiful garden in order to worship Providence as much as they can, and the Luminarians create shrines and temples in order to worship Providence as their god. While the numerous brought back species live in peace and harmony, a new unwelcome species enters the party. Humans on their random space journeys in a ship named the Contact Light, which was a human cargo ship and expedition ship, would enter orbit and hover over Petrichor 5 for about 5 days. In these days, the humans would set up camps and survey the land while also capturing different fauna and species in hopes to experiment on them and learn. This would not please Providence, as eventually he would use one of his teleporters to go upon the ship and create an end to the human expedition, killing everyone on board, freeing the random captives and crashing the ship. During this time, the ship would send out multiple drop pods, which would be your known survivors, who would then go on to relink with the ship and finish off Providence in a final battle and escape the planet. Years later, a second ship would come in contact with Petrichor specifically in order to find out what happened to the contact light. This ship would go by the name of the UES Safe Travels. They would, as well, hover over Petrichor, but this time send in units of different survivors and hope to figure out what is happening. Eventually, these survivors, after enough teleporting, would make their way to Commencement, the moon Mithrix is trapped on, and battle him in a last hope to ever escape the planet. Upon fighting and winning, the humans would have to make their way to a lockdown ship on the moon and use it to escape briefly before the moon explodes, while Void Reavers attempt to take over the moon. And that is the brief story of the Risk of Rain franchise. But now, with months later and plenty of built-up anticipation for Seekers of the Storm, just exactly how does this build into the story even if it feels like it's over? And how is it done so well? To understand what we're dealing with, when it comes to Seekers of the Storm, everything we need to know is told to us through this announcement trailer. Remember when I told you to remember Aurelianite? Well, now that her captors are gone, she is left to roam and finally reach beyond her cage in order to feel exact freedom, and with her perfection and the Luminarians feeling scared without their god, they build a golden statue in the wake of Providence, which then comes to life with Aurelianite's perfection. The false sun is born, left to roam, with complete innocence and curiosity, is then attacked by Mithrix's followers and is corrupted by his power, changing the false sun from the once curious and calm being into a powerful and hateful god, with nothing but the pure desire to destroy every species in his path, and challenge you to seek his divine rule and crumble. So now we know who the next antagonist is, the false sun. A very angry, powerful being made with the perfection of Aurelianite, driven by the passion of Providence, and swallowed by the hatred and loneliness of Mithrix. He now tends to bring a new salvation to the life of Petrichor 5. And with that being said, that's all we know for now about the continuation of Risk Rain 2. We don't know if this will have any crazy lasting effects on the story, or if somehow this ends up opening more doors to newer possibilities. For example, with how during the moon escape, you start to see Void Reavers attack you, which then opens up the can of worms to the entire Survivors of the Void DLC. So I'm very excited to see where Gearbox takes this all. Now, although that's what we know about how the game is extended story-wise for now, what exactly is extended gameplay-wise? Well, with the Festival of the Gup DLC, we get a little brief window into some of the new additions to the game to come along with this DLC. Right off the bat, we were given a quick little sneak peek into some of the new looks for the stages alongside some cool artwork for the stages, and what has motivated them. For example, during the showcase, art lead for Gearbox, Claire Bayon, shows us an example of a stage they are creating which is heavily inspired by a specific enemy in the game. For example, we know Abyssal Depths, the stage in the base game that looks like hell, is linked to the Imp Overlord and his army, while as the stage we're showing is a massive castle in a very lava-esque location with the remains of what seems to be a magma worm, which could this potentially be where they specifically come from? She also talks about Verdant Falls, with how we are already given access to this map. It is apparent that Verdant Falls is going to play a way bigger part in the upcoming DLC. Right after this is also explained by James Lopez, the managing director of Gearbox, that we are most likely going to see an update almost to an even or bigger size to what Survivors of the Void brought to the table, such as new items, maps, enemies, and even more survivors. Right after this, we're shown to a newer function that's going to take place in a game, such as the day and night cycles, which will be important as not only do stages have different looking versions that have cooler new functions, but also night maps will have certain accessible areas that for say you can't access during the day and vice versa. And most excitingly, with the end of the Festival of Gup, the last thing we hear about is presented by Gearbox lore master Kayla Larson.
I've been really excited to work with the team and help plan the next 5 or 10 years for this franchise. There's a lot of directions that we could go in it. Pretty much every direction is interesting. There's High Court, there's heretics, there's the two brothers. Where do they come from? Are there more of them? What is the space sickness that keeps them locked and isolated on this planet? Does that apply to all Cyclopses? There's a ton of mysteries to be dug out in this world, and I look forward to pulling every thread I can find.
And so with all being said, at the time, that is what we are left with, and what we know about Seekers of the Storm, until about 5 months later, on the Gearbox YouTube channel, a video is posted titled Seekers of the Storm Dev Diary 2, which is basically an update and hype bringer on what is going to be coming in a similar style to the video we watched back in November. In this video, the first thing off the bat that catches the eye is what the narrator describes as traveling the path of the Colossus. Then, we are shown similar maps to what we saw during the festival, but this time, you travel between stages in an upward climb. Now, in order to access the quote-unquote Colossus, we're shown what seems to be green portal that we can now find, and not only that, but Verdant Falls will have what seems to be a type of boss fight, which seems to do serious damage. We will cover this boss fight later. Immediately after, we're shown a closer look at some of what will be the new maps, with first what seems to be an underground-esque temple, which followed up by our new stage we haven't seen yet, Shattered Abodes, an abandoned Luminarian metropolis with what seems to be a giant crater in the dead center of their city. One of the cool looking things of the stage is that it's so diverse in landscape that you can almost find yourself in numerous different situations all around the place, and on this stage is where we are reintroduced to a new upcoming enemy to the game, the Child, which, if you have ever played Risk of Rain 1, is a small but deadly variant of the already known parent and grandparent, and while not too bad alone, can be fatal in groups. On top of all of this, looping will now be seeing changes as maps that otherwise wouldn't be playable will now start to appear on your stages, making a hopefully newer and less dull experience to late game runs and the ability of just normal gameplay looping. On top of this, various stages will now start to see different paths carved out, but we are only shown one sneak peek on Verdant Falls, as they don't want to show us too much, and with that, the video ends, and all is silent for now. So, now that we got everything that we'll hear for now from the devs, it's up to the rest to be determined with the internet, until a month later, on May 21st, 2024, Woolly, a large YouTuber with the Risk of Rain community, dropped a video about an apparent Gearbox leak that leaked a lot of details, specifically one that we can expect for the DLC, and a Google document, which I will link in the description of what we can expect Survivor-wise, music-wise, and others. Alrighty, what's up everybody? So if you're seeing this now, I have switched away from the script to kind of just do like a free ball little run over of what to be expected in the Seekers of the Seekers of the Storm leaked info. So first off, we have our boss page, and on our boss page, from what we see, is the false sun. He has his skills and everything. And from what we could see, he has a column swing, which is probably his like little mace looking thing. A lunar pillar, which only I can assume that basically it's like similar to Aurelia Knight's thing, but probably like more cracked out. And then his lunar gaze, which I believe is his lunar beam that like comes out of his like eye, basically. And then there's his skill 4, which is a little interesting because it's like Prime Devastator / Tainted Offering. Now I don't know what that means. And by the fact that it's like cast and orb appear and all that, I want to say it's kind of like a curse. I wonder if he like curses the characters in a way, but in the sense of how like the grandparent like puts up the sun. The next thing we have is the enemy pages. So, for example, we have the Child, which we've already gone over, but in the Risk of Rain 2 version. And then we have the Halcyonite, which what seems to be, according to its description, is that giant rocky golem thing that like beats your ass on Verdant Falls in the devlogs. And then we have Scorchwing, which we haven't seen yet, but according to its name and kind of description, it seems like it's going to be a part of that kind of underground lava temple that had the like the dead magma worms in it, so that should be kind of interesting. Top of this, we have some miscellaneous stuff, like different like things for the boss spawning and sprinting and all that stuff. But here's what's really exciting, and so if you haven't played Risk of Rain 2 by the time you're watching this video, one of the things you should know is that there is no voiceover in the game. There's no voices. It's all just text and titles. So in the event that you get to this boss fight, this boss is going to actually talk to you. Now, bosses do talk to you in the game now, but not like through kind of like the chat in the bottom left. So this will be kind of cool to see be different, as we know that the boss will actually like speak to you. Now, I don't know if it's going to be kind of like Mythrix, where it's like he only is going to have 5 voiceovers. I hope he has multiple dialogue lines that can rather randomly play or just consistently play, which I think would be really cool to hear him talk to you. And then of course we have his phases, which is a pretty like crazy looking thing, because he has kneel, land impact, distant thunder, jump away final, and then teleport back. So it's almost at this rate where it's like, I don't even know what's happening during this. From what I can gather is, so he jumps away, and I wanna think is that he like, for a minute he's like impossible to hit, and there's like distant thunder in the background. So I wonder if he's like away from the stage attacking you from afar or something. I don't know how that's gonna work. Or if he jumps away, is it gonna be like some kind of like Lunar Chimera things where you have to like fight a like different phase or something? But who knows. So the phases will be kind of interesting. And then we have our survivors, which is pretty exciting to see. So first off the bat, we have Chef, which is going to be Chefbot. And if you haven't played Risk Rain 1, Chefbot is a character that originates from the first game, and he is kind of like, for lack of better terms, he seems almost like a melee version of Multi. And we don't know a lot of his skills, but we do know that, of course, he has a meat cleaver that he throws and it comes back to him. And so that's kind of like, it's kind of like a mid-range maybe melee, so who knows. And then we have False Sun, which is the character I'm most excited for. And so yeah, you heard it right. From what I can gather, what I'm guessing, once you kill the False Sun, and you like beat the Colossus in the game that way, kind of similar to how you get the Void Fiend when you beat the Voidwing in Survivors of the Void, you get False Sun as a playable character, which is super sick in my opinion. And so he has the same skills, so we're assuming he's gonna have his swing, because his sword. Then he has Lunar Spikes, which is probably gonna act, what I'm assuming is similar to how What's-Her-Face Artificer uses her ice. But the difference is as you can see back on the False Sun, where skill 4 was instead like Tainted Offering, which seemed to be like a curse of some sort. Instead, skill 4 is his laser from his eyes, but instead he has a movement which is his dash. So that should be interesting. So it almost sounds like the False Sun is going to play as more of a kind of similar to Acrid, how he's a melee character but also has a ranged ability, and his laser almost seems to be a mix between Void Fiend and Acrid, if that makes sense. And then we have our most anticipated survivor is Seeker. And so there's not much information about the Seeker, other than the fact that what's going to be new is that they're going to have a bunch of different sounds depending on like what like kind of element they're touching. But other than that, we know that their one skill is going to be firing an orb, and that their like utility skill, their skill 4, is going to most likely have a combo mechanic, which might be super interesting. So on that note, one of the things we do know about the Seeker, since we don't have a lot of info, is that they actually bring up the Seeker in the Verdant Falls environment log that you could unlock by finding like the broken drone. And it tells you that there was this group of basically survivors that were like kind of running out of hope, and then out of nowhere someone from the High Court, which if you don't know already is where Artificer from, has found them and told them that they're going to lead them out of there, and that their name was the Seeker, or and they like mentioned that the Seeker mentioned they're from like the High Court or something. So it's almost like the Seeker might be like a tweaked or different version of Artificer, which I think might be pretty cool. And then we have our items. So we're going to get a few new items, and some of these items actually look like they're going to be pretty good. So we have a heal and revive item, which is interesting. So there might actually be a way to get revived into the game. Trigger enemy debuffs that I don't know how that will work, but I'm assuming it's going to be kind of close to the human effigy. And then you have teleport on low health, which almost sounds like a more upgraded self kit, pretty much, which is going to be kind of cool. Knockback enemy item, a increased primary damage item. There's going to be extra stats on level up, probably. And then you're going to have an extra shrine item, which sounds kind of cool, where it's like, if you hit the shrine, you'll probably get 2 more items, and it sounds like it's going to be an investment item, kind of similar to the key, in a sense, or almost like the shipping log thing, where it's like you get the 2 items. So that sounds kind of cool, like a chance to get even more items, which will be nice. And then we have our music. So if you listen to the instructions here, which I'm not going to go over because I don't actually understand them, there's 8 tracks for Secrets of the Storm, and you're able to listen to them and install them into Risk of Rain 2 now. But on a different note, 3 of them are actually on YouTube. So if you want to go ahead and go listen to them and kind of get a sense of what it sounds like, they are there. So just look up Chris Kanalou, I think. Sorry, I might have butchered that. I love your music, but yeah, he might have some stuff there. Other than that, we have one stage marked down, and all we know about the stage is that it's most likely going to be the False Suns boss stage, as all it tells us is boss start, you know, all this stuff, activate loop. We have bolt strikes, which is kind of sounding like it's related to the Distant Thunder. And then we have audios and stuff like that. So yeah, this is kind of what we have of stages, kind of log-wise, other than the fact that we've seen a lot of the stages in the dev vlogs. So it's almost as we aren't missing out too much. And so with that being said, I'm going to head back to the main video, and we will wrap up with everything I have to say about Seekers of the Storm. Finally, after all the devlogs and leaks bringing hype to the community, leaving us only to ponder what is to actually come, all we are left with is speculation and excitement. But mainly, I want to talk about what exactly it is about Secrets of the Storm that catches my eye, and why I think it is the perfect way to keep a story going, especially one that I'm so fond of as Risk of Rain's story in of itself. Now, even though Risk of Rain is technically early on into its storytelling, since they have only seen 2 games and 1 DLC, I do believe that they are doing way better when it comes to DLCs and plot continuation in comparison to what has happened to some of my other favorite video game stories. 2 examples I'm going to use here are the continued 343 storyline for Halo, and the storyline for the Fallout series, and how after New Vegas, once 4 and 76 came out, the whole point of the story was thrown out the window. Now, unfortunately, I would like to talk about the Call of Duties, especially Black Ops 3 and Modern Warfare 3, the new ones anyways, as I cared for both of these series stories, but refused to play their campaigns, as I didn't like the early BO3 story, and Modern Warfare 3 I refused to buy. But when we took a look at Halo 4, which would have been the first continuation of Halo since Bungie's departure from the franchise, we take a look into Master Chief fighting a new foe named the Didact, which is a character that didn't really relate to the Halo franchise, except for the fact that he was a mysterious figure during the Halo 3 Hidden Terminals, where it's explained that he was fallen to the corruption of the Primordial and helped release the Flood. But by the time we meet him, the whole point to the Forerunners and Halo is now out of the picture, as for some reason his only goal once being accidentally freed from Master Chief is to piss on humanity, which makes so little sense in comparison to the whole Covenant arc that just doesn't seem like a feasible way to continue your story writing, and ultimately making your fan base lose trust in what your games have to offer. And for my second example, with the shift to Fallout New Vegas to Fallout 4, we have New Vegas, the story that has you shot in the head for something you were carrying as a courier, then you wake up out of pure luck in order to track your killer down, only to find out that what he stole off you was a master key to create a robot army that would ultimately help reinforce a specific side of a wide-range conflict, which, against your will, you find yourself randomly going from courier to an ultimate decider in the fate of the Wasteland. Really good story writing that made me want for more. Kind of how Fallout 3 made me want to see the Wasteland after initiating Project Purity, but with Fallout 4, which would be Bethesda's next title, we would take in the footsteps of a war veteran dad who lives through the bombs dropping only to be frozen in a crowd chamber and asleep for over 200 years. Upon waking up, his wife gets sniped and his child stolen, then he frees again. Years pass by once more and you're awakened to go find your son, so you track him down across the Wasteland, aimlessly to a destination you might be able to find, learn the town's detective is gone, find a detective, he leads you to your wife's killer, which you kill him, then he finds out he was a part of a secret organization, then you meet the Brotherhood, this time the Brotherhood as the one from Fallout 3, and they're basically like, use a teleporter, go in, find your son, turns out he's actually older than you now, and he also likes to kidnap children. Get mad, leave, go back to the Brotherhood, tell them how mad you are, and nuke the Institute and your son. Then the best part yet, no one bats an eye. They basically tell you, hey, thanks for doing all the hard work, here's 10 Chuck E. Cheese coins. And that's the game. We barely get no story connection from the East Coast part of the game, and no links between the 3 to 4 other than reoccurring characters. The story itself feels like a random insertion for an excuse to make another game. Although I did really enjoy the gameplay of Fallout 4, story-wise, it was left in the dust. So that leaves us with Seekers of the Storm. Seekers of the Storm is such an exciting and good continuation to a game franchise, as it not only recognizes what exactly happened in the last game, but because of this recognition, every event that happened in the previous story is the exact reason why we have what's going to be happening in Seekers of the Storm. On top of this, the game does an interesting thing where you're still present in the same game that the story originally took place, but now you feel as if you're following in the footprints of an old battlefield, and now you are experiencing the results of what happened previously. Just by the trailer, our new villain brings an almost unique taste to what it means to continue having an antagonist, as this time, this antagonist is made up of all the pieces of what our game previously had, such as the big 3, still cool music backing his fresh new voice, and many more that will be new for players to experience gameplay wise. Especially, I feel as Secrets of the Storm is going to be a massive change to what Risk of Rain 2 is as a game, as now we're going to have a basically completely new world to traverse through, with new stages and how they act, to new enemies, new items, and a brand new soundtrack to probably jam out to as we are fighting our way through the new Colossus. And with all of this, it feels as if they're actually taking Risk of Rain and trying to do something new, instead of being cowards and releasing the same content, but this time $10 more. Now, before I wrap this video up, I do want to talk about a theory that I have for the future of Risk of Rain as a whole. As of now, we have an understanding of what our immediate future holds. When we go back and talk about the Gearbox Lore Master, Kayla Larson, and how she mentions excitement on what Risk of Rain holds for the next 5 to 10 years, something that would be cool to see happen for maybe, who knows, a Risk of Rain 3, is to maybe see the next title of this franchise take place on Earth. As in the story by logbooks, we know that Providence feared humanity, and their factor of most likely being the end to themselves, aka most likely war, global warming, something along those lines, but we know that Mithrix acknowledges that Earth does indeed exist, and if that he were to plan to get off the moon, that he would head there first and potentially destroy whatever it is that Providence seeks on Earth. We also get another acknowledgement of Earth from the Survivors of the Void DLC, as for the logbook of the planetarium being a description of the simulacrum as a prison that makes its prisoners do repeated laps of combat in order for the Void to gather as much info as it can on specific beings and their ability to fight and become more powerful. We know from this logbook that the people who were in the simulacrum were able to break out once or twice and was able to go to Earth and even Venus. So now that we know that the Cyclops gods knew of Earth, and that now because of these prisoners in the simulacrum, that the Void now knows of the existence of the solar system, I think it would be cool to see everything that we know somehow end up invading Earth, and so now we might have an even bigger desire for survival in the Risk of Rain franchise. Maybe being able to fight against the Void, against other human planets like Venus, or fight off the species of Petrichor 5 in an invasion attempt against Earth, and fight in their like sci-fi megacities. Who knows? But anyways, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, it means a lot. Please like and subscribe, and if you want to see more content, go ahead and watch my other videos as I have some interesting stuff. Anyways, catch you later.